In life, we all encounter obstacles, and those obstacles come in all different shapes, sizes, and forms. The question is, how do we handle those obstacles? Do we attack them head on, or do we allow them to make us quit? Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up on themselves, their dreams, or their goals. We will interview successful people from all walks of life as they share their no-quit stories when they had the choice to give up or give in, but they didn't. We thank you for listening, and we hope to be that jolt of positivity as you go for your greatness. Welcome to episode number 103 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is comfort zone. Our quote of the day comes to us from Neil Donald Walsh. Life begins at the end of your comfort zone. I'm both thrilled and humbled to bring you today's episode. I initially met T.C. Bradley when he reached out to me and sent me a signed copy of his new best-selling book titled Supernatural Success. We spoke a couple of times on the phone, and I knew I had to have him on the show. What I didn't know at the time was that T.C. had an incredible no-quit story of his own, as he was clinically dead for 1.5 to 2 minutes 6 years ago. With that said, I hope you enjoy today's episode. T.C., I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Hey, Christopher, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on your podcast.
I appreciate you spending some time with us. So the first question we ask everybody is, are you ready to bring it today?
It's fixing to be one, as they say on the South Side.
So the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never give up. And I know you have quite a no-quit story, and I was wondering if you could briefly share a little bit of that with our audience.
Well, I think I have the ultimate no-quit story, Christopher, but I'd be happy to share that with you. 6 years ago, this month, as a matter of fact, Chris, I don't know if you're aware of this, but on March 20th of this month will be the 6-year anniversary of when I had a sudden cardiac arrest outside of my home, and I was clinically dead for 1.5 to 2 minutes. When I say I was clinically dead, a sudden cardiac arrest is not like a heart attack. A sudden cardiac arrest is really dealing with the electrical part of your heart, and your heart just stops right like that. And so I was without a heartbeat or a pulse for 1.5 to 2 minutes before the paramedics revived me. And they shocked me 2 times to bring me back. And then when I went into the hospital, they took me into the hospital, took me into surgery, emergency surgery immediately. And it turned out that I had a 100% blockage of my left ascending artery as well. And they call that the widowmaker. And that is just so fatal. They call it the widowmaker because it's fatal the majority of times. As a matter of fact, the survival rate for a out-of-hospital sudden cardiac arrest is less than 1%. You just don't make it. And if you do survive, if you are fortunate enough to survive that incident, usually you have some sort of deficits because of the lack of oxygen and blood flow to your brain and your vital organs. And yet I was without spot or blemish. If you think back to Michael Clark Duncan, the tremendous actor in the movie The Green Mile, he had a sudden cardiac arrest in his house, and Omarosa, who was his fiancée at the time, she was able to revive him, but he was gone for 5 minutes, and where I was gone for 2 minutes about, and but they got him to the hospital, and he passed away 2 weeks later because it was just so catastrophic to his organs, his internal organs, and unfortunately he passed away 2 weeks later. So the survival rate, I knew my life had been spared for a reason, Chris, and I knew it wasn't just for business, and so that's where the no-quit living comes into play. I knew my life had been spared, and I knew I was to write a book about it, and yet I had never written a book, but I knew I was being called to write a book. And within 90 days of being released from the hospital, I wrote that book called God Says When, and I published it on Amazon. And then I used what I know from an internet marketing standpoint to drive that thing to bestseller status on the day it debuted. We beat out legendary leaders like Joe Osteen and TD Jakes for a day or two on the bestseller list. And I say that because, I don't have the media budget that those guys have, right? I don't come anywhere near having their media budget, but yet we were able to surpass them on the bestseller list. Even if it was only for a day or two, I'll take that. And so when I saw what was happening with how people responded to me as being a published best-selling author, it sort of shifted my attention into the publishing and media space, where I have resided for the last 4 years. We've got a publishing and media company now. We've currently, I deal with very high-level entrepreneurs that want to stand out as the leader in their space, and so we help them not only publish their book, but make sure that when it debuts on the Amazon list, that it debuts #1 on the Amazon bestseller list. And so far, in the 4 years that we've been doing this, I've helped create 75 plus #1 best-selling authors with my media and publishing business. Been seen on TV. I get my clients featured on TV as well. So it's been an incredible ride. And just recently, Christopher, I can tell you that I released my business book, the first business book that I've written, called Supernatural Success: How I Generated over $1 million in sales online and beat Oprah in website traffic. And I'm happy to report that that book debuted #1 on the bestseller list. And it's just opened up so many doors of opportunity for me as well with speaking engagements. At the end of this month, I'll be on a talk show that is aired in 171 different countries. And yet, 6 years ago, when I stepped on that studio, March 28th, 6 years ago, I was in a cardiac intensive care unit 6 years ago. So I am a living witness to what you are and what your show really is all about, No Quit Living, because I never gave up in my journey. And I attribute that to what you are such a passionate believer in, No Quit Living.
I appreciate you sharing that. It's quite a remarkable story, and I had the honor. You sent me a autographed copy, and I read it, your new book, and I think it's incredible. And we will have to talk at some point offline, because I definitely have a book or two or 10 inside me, I believe. So we'll definitely have to touch base offline.
Christopher, I'll tell you this: that most people do have a book in them, but I would tell you that most people will die with their book still in them. I know I did. Right? I died with that book in me. And but it's like anything else. When you've been called to do something, everyone, I think, has a purpose, right? And what that purpose is. What you've been called to do, I haven't been called to do. And what I've been called to do, you haven't been called to do. But we've all been called to do something. And I think nowadays, it is so achievable and doable to bring a book to marketplace, right? We live in a different time and place, in a much different marketplace for sure. So I would highly encourage you, Christopher, to go ahead and start working on that to bring it to market. I believe you have a message for the hour. I believe in your message, and I believe your voice deserves to be heard on a global platform.
No, I appreciate that. It means a lot coming from you. So I wanted to change lanes for a minute and ask you, how do you personally define success?
I personally define success. I think it's doing what you want to do when you want to do it, without the influence of others' opinions. I think that social media, it's interesting with social media. I think social media it's a great, fantastic tool, but it also, I think, inhibits people from being successful because they never get out of the gates in the first place. With that Supernatural Success book that we were just talking about, when I went to publish that book, I almost didn't publish it Because here's what happens when the clouds part, you get this divine inspiration. You're called to do something. The moment that happens, you just know that you've been called to do that. And then there's a little fat man that sits up on your shoulder. And there's actually two fat men, one on one shoulder, the other fat man's on the other shoulder. And literally, you've got the one whispering in your ear going, go for it. Go for it, Christopher. You can do it. And then you've got that other fat man going, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are to write a book or to publish a book or to start that business? And so often you allow that little fat man on your shoulder or some hater on social media to deter you from actually even getting started. So for me, success is the person that steps up to the plate, steps up to their purpose, regardless of personal opinion, regardless of somebody else's opinion. You know what you've been called to do. You need to put the blinders on. And the people that do that, those are people that I attribute success to. People that get off the couch and do something in spite of what others, whether they agree with it or not. So that, to me, I think sums up success in my book.
No, I definitely agree. And would you think possibly, or do you think possibly, that it's also sometimes not only both fat people on your shoulders, but possibly the fear of the unknown?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. Wealth and prosperity are never found on the safety of the shoreline. They're never found there. You've got to go to the deep end of the water if you're going to have, and I'm talking about real prosperity and real wealth. Those riches are not found on the safety of the shoreline. You're going to have to leave that comfort zone of the shoreline and go into the deep waters. And, Christopher, I'll tell you this, the best coaches in the world, the best people that are in the coaching practice, what they do is they're highly skilled at taking their clientele to the deep end of the water. If you're a coach and somebody's coming to you with their dream and their vision, I feel you have a responsibility to them to take those clients into the deep end of the water, because that is where the wealth and the fortune lies, not on the shoreline.
I love that analogy, and a lot of people talk about comfort zone, and I just think it's a great analogy of going into the deep end, because I think that's where all the magic, and that's probably where you get to the point where you push yourself beyond what you think is your comfort zone.
Well, it's interesting, that first book that I wrote, God Says When, the first day I returned from the hospital, I walked into my office and I started working on that book. And it was outside of my comfort zone. I've never written a actual book before. And it was interesting because I still had residual electricity going through my body from those volts, those two shocks that they gave me to bring me back to jumpstart me back to life. And I'd sit there and I'd just do a little jerk out of the blue, and it was very uncomfortable, but I pressed through that uncomfort. So you're absolutely spot on with your analysis on that.
So one of the things we always look to do is to add value to our listeners, and I was curious if you have either a morning or a daily ritual that you swear by.
Yes, I do have a morning ritual that I swear by, and that is exercise in the morning. I love to exercise in the morning, and I also pray in the morning. I think that sets the tone for my day when I actually commit that day to the Lord, and I actually pray. So those are two bedrock principles in my life, in my morning routine.
No, those are the two of the four most common answers, and I think it's interesting because we've had some amazingly successful people from all walks of life, and those are the two staples of most of that answers. And some have some crazy things that they do, very detailed, but most of the people, it's something with exercise, physical, mental, praying, gratitude. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. Assuming the 20-year-old version of yourself would have listened, what would be the one piece of advice you would have given to the 20-year-old TC?
That's a great question to ask. I don't know if the 20-year-old version of TC would have listened to the current version of TC, the first and foremost. But what I would say is to put the blinders on, and not let the opinions of others influence you as much as maybe you did, and maybe not be as trusting with partnerships as well, because I had a terrible experience with a partnership with the first company that I started here. When Vicki and I came down to Florida and we relocated from Chicago to Florida, we started a direct sales company here, and it was an immediate success, Christopher. I mean, we did $1.6 million in sales in the first 6 months. The business was doing $100,000, $150,000 a day in revenues. And so we thought we were set. We had brought a partner in, a man that we trusted like a father figure. And 6 months into the business, he terminated the partnership and kept the company. So we lost that. So I would tell 20-year-old TC, stay the heck away from that guy. Because he's a rat, and you can't trust him like you think you can. And so that might be like number one on my list. Don't trust that guy, and listen to my wife more.
That's good advice.
Right. Because my wife, I'll tell you what, Christopher, I've been married for 25 plus years to my wife, Miss Vicki. And I can tell you that God has given women something called intuition, right? And a woman doesn't even have to know all the facts of something, but intuitively they know what's going on. And I can tell you that any major business decision that I do, I always involve my wife with it now. And it's not that she has to know all those details. It's just that I want to tap into that self-defense mechanism that God has gifted her with. Because for her, she doesn't have to know all the facts, but if it doesn't feel right, something in her spirit's off, then I want to respect that. And usually it's spot on in her analysis. So,
no, that's interesting. And I think whether it's a spouse, significant other, business partner, or a mentor, I think that's some great advice, because a lot of times you may feel or think something, and it's good to get somebody else's input. So it's definitely some good advice. So here's a different question for you. If you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
My mom and dad. My mom and dad. I lost my mother at 40. My mother was 46 years of age. My father passed away. 15 years ago. And if I could have dinner with anybody for one moment in time, it'd be my mom and my dad. See, growing up, Christopher, my heroes have never been the sports players and the athletes and the actors. Growing up, my heroes have always been my family. And so without question, if I was given that opportunity, I would not hesitate, not for a moment, not for a second. It'd be my mom and dad.
No, it's important, and I think it's always interesting. The answers from that question is a lot of times they're family members, friends, a lot of times people that they didn't get a chance to spend a lot of time with, and so I think that's important to really step out of your comfort zone in regards to what it would be. And I think it would be a great dinner for you, because obviously you lost both of them a while ago, so I think it would be a very interesting dinner that you would definitely enjoy.
Right.
So I wanted to ask if there's anything that you're working on or releasing soon that you'd like to share with our listeners.
Well, yes. In March 28th of this month, we'll be going into the studios in Atlanta and shooting this talk show that will be aired in 171 different countries. So I'm very, very happy about that and very honored. It's sort of like, that book, and it's based on the Supernatural Success book that I've written. And I can tell you that the feedback that I've gotten from that book has just been off of the chart. It has been amazing that people not only have read the book, but they reread the book as well. And so I would encourage your listeners to make sure they tune in to watch that show, because it's fixing to be one when I walk into that studio on that particular day. So.
No, I'll definitely shoot it out and share it as well, and I appreciate you mentioning that. So before we let you go, I wanted to ask if you have any parting words that you'd like to leave with our listeners.
Yeah, I would have some parting words to leave with your listeners. First, thank you for having me on the show. I certainly appreciate it. It's been an honor to be on here. But I would say that everyone's been called to do something. Everyone has been called to do that. What is that one thing that you've been called to do that you've put off to the side, you've put it on the shelf? What is that one thing that you've been called to do? Make it this year that you take the action to make that dream a reality. Take it off of the shelf, take it off of the shelf, and do something. Take one little step. You know, God gives us dreams. He doesn't give us the blueprints in life. He'll give a dream, but he doesn't give a blueprint. You take one step to be given the next step. But if you never take that first step, God will never give you the second step. So take that first step. Do something small in advancement of that dream and watch what will happen in your life.
No, that's great advice, and one of the things we often touch on with No Quit Living is accountability, and we feel that there are 3 A's of accountability, and the first and foremost is taking action. So I could not agree more with that. So last question, and I promise it's the easiest one we've asked so far, is what's the best way for our listeners to connect, follow you, or also to get your books if they're interested in purchasing them as well?
Sure. Our books are available on Amazon.com. Supernatural Success. And I want to say this about Supernatural Success is that what people are looking for, they're looking for certainty in their life, especially financial, this financial aspect of your life. And I've used these spiritual laws that I teach about in that book to create 100% certainty in my life. And it speaks for itself, some of the results that I've been able to achieve. So I'd highly recommend that you go over to Amazon.com, look me up there, TC Bradley, or you can find the book at supernaturalsuccessbook.com. I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn as well, and you can connect with me there as well. I'd love to hear from your listeners.
No, I appreciate that. We'll put some of those sites and things in the show notes, and I'm also connected to you on Facebook. So for any of our listeners that follow me or connect with me, you'll see some links and mentions to you as well. So listen, TC, I truly appreciate not only your time, but what you've shared with us, and I look forward to hopefully connecting with you soon.
That sounds great, Christopher. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to episode number 103. TC Bradley is quite an inspirational individual that is all about making things happen. In addition to being a best-selling author himself, his publishing company has helped create over 75 #1 best-selling authors. 2 very impressive accomplishments. TC mentioned something that was very interesting. He believes that most people do have a book within them, but unfortunately most people die with their book not written. TC believes that we all need to get out of our comfort zone, leave the shoreline, and head into the deep end. He took it one step further when he said that he feels the best coaches take their clients into the deep end. And I happen to agree 100% with him. In his parting words, TC spoke about how he truly believes that everyone in life is called to do something, but many times people put it off and make excuses. He stressed the importance of taking that first step, taking action, and continuing to move forward. My question to our listeners is just that. What is your calling, and why have you put it off? If there is something that you want to accomplish, why haven't you even tried? I challenge you today to make a decision right this minute that you will no longer give or accept your own excuses. Decide right now to take that first step of action. It might be scary, could be the hardest thing you've ever done, but you owe it to yourself. Eliminate your excuses, don't accept them, don't make them, and take action as you go for your greatness. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.